Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Writers Chat, the place for writers where we talk about all things writing and writerly. And we're really glad to have Jeannie back with us. She's been traveling around Russia and Scandinavia. She was telling us about it just before we started the recording. So glad to have you back and eager to hear more about your stories and your trip. Welcome to everybody who's here, both here live while we do the recording and in the replay. This is one of our open mic sessions, so we want everybody to stay on. So those of you who have kind of blacked out, if you want to come back on and stay on, that'd be great. We're going to be talking about movies and books that star writers. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be the writer is the hero or heroine of the book or the movie. And I'm going to start off with one that I really like. It's a little bit different. And then we're going to kind of open it up, and then, I've got more than one, and we'll just kind of go around and see who comes up with what. But the one that I'm going to talk about is called Martian Child, it's an older movie, maybe 2007. I didn't write down the name or the date. Starring John Cusack as a science fiction writer who adopts a little boy who believes he is from Mars. Rather than facing abandonment of his parents, this little child has decided he was sent to Mars to study Earth and the inhabitants. So he wears a big belt around his little waist, and he has a little helmet, or sometimes he's in a box so that the sun can't bother him. So he, because the sun is too hot here. Just a very tender story of this writer who writes about, aliens on other planets and all that kind of stuff, and how he relates to this little boy and sort of pulls him out of his imaginary world and some of the issues they face, because the little boy steals things because he's collecting. He's on expedition, collecting things, and they just have to work through some really sad things. Sad to say, when I looked it up this morning to kind of refresh my mind, it's been a long time since I've seen it. Rotten reviews. It's not a critic's favorite at all. It is, though. The movie is sort of based on a short story called The Martian Child. Later, the author of that story, wrote a semi-autobiographical story also called The Martian Child, and he really did, adopt a little boy. Now, I don't know how much of it, was like this. But anyway, so the main star is a science fiction writer, and you see that he is stuck on he's supposed to be turning in a sequel, and he can't do it because he's so engaged with this little boy, and he tries to make time to write, and it's not coming. And instead of writing his sequel, he ends up writing the story of this little boy and his adoption. And his publisher's really angry, but then, you see her on the plane reading this story instead and being very touched by it. So that's my contribution. The Martian Child, it's on DVD if you get a chance to watch it. It's just sweet. And I don't know, it was a box office bomb, but did not make back its money at all. But it is Cusack, and it's very cute and very family friendly too. I mean, older children could watch it.
That's great. I don't think I've ever even heard of that one. Anybody else seen that one or heard that one?
Nope.
Oh, I recommend it. It's just sweet. It's just really sweet.
Yeah, never have. Well, I got two I want to mention. I'll jump in and then we'll kind of open it up and see on that. The one was just out last year, and it's called The Man Who Invented Christmas.
I have that on the list too.
Yay! So we got to talk about this.
You stole mine, Jane. You stole mine. That's what
All right. Well, we'll have a discussion on this one. I rewatched it on the plane over to Europe on the way over. So I said, "Oh, this is perfect," because I knew we were going to have this as soon as I got back. This is as a discussion and stuff. And I did a little background check, because you know how you can check how much truth is to to the movie, and a lot of what went on in The Man Who Invented Christmas is about Charles Dickens, by the way, if you don't know the history of it. And it is, a lot of it is based on true, as much as you can base it on true. But a lot of it was about the period of time. You know, here he had all this success as a writer, and then you have to follow up with the next book, and he can't get past his publishers what he really wants to do. And basically he decides, he gets inspired to write a book about Christmas, and the publisher, the editors say, oh, that's such a minor holiday. Why do you want to write about Christmas? And because he wrote the Christmas Carol, what ended up being the Christmas Carol, it really made Christmas a major holiday and brought the emphasis of giving and a lot of hope in a relatively dark time of year when you think about in the Northern Hemisphere how dark Christmas is, and all the poverty that was occurring in the child labor and all that stuff touches it in that. A couple things I really like about the movie there. It was starred Dan Stevens, who is just delightful, and Christopher Plummer is Scrooge, because the characters he goes into his writing studio, which is just, as writers, you got to watch just those scenes alone. It's what, Johnny?
It's wonderful. The couch and the books all over the place. And
it is great. And then the first scene, you sit there and says, and actually I looked up the quote to see, he's got the gem of the idea starting, and he's trying to come up with the name Scrooge. And of course he's going Scrooge, and I can't even tell you all what he's coming, all the variations, and as the audience you want to go Scrooge. But anyway, he makes a comment, if you get the name right, then if you're lucky, the character will appear, and he's not here yet. And when he finally comes up with this Scrooge, there's Christopher Plummer as Scrooge in the office himself. And they have these delightful conversations, just delightful. And as he writes the book, his office fills up with all the different characters.
They follow him around London.
They do. They follow him around and they observe things, and they'll say, no, that's not right. There is a wonderful scene where Scrooge says to Charles Dickens that he wants his character to appear different. And Charles Dickens said, I'm the author here. And the Scrooge says, well, allegedly. Now, if you take my advice, and then the other key thing, and then I'll let you guys jump in on that I liked about it, is in the original, he's writing it, Tiny Tim dies. And all the characters says, you can't let him die. You can't let him die. And he has an early reader, which is the maid in the house, and she said, you can't let him die. And so it's interesting as a writer to get caught up in the process and get caught up in the characters and allow the story to evolve the way it should evolve. And he has writer's block and he has a deadline. It's just everything. So those of you that saw that too, what else, I don't know if I captured it all. What else do you want to add, or what you like about it?
Didn't he have to finish it in like 2 weeks or something?
Yeah, or 6 weeks or something like that. Very short deadline. And the publishers refused to publish it, so he kind of self-published it, if I remember right.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and it became a classic.
Did you say this was your book too, or movie?
Ron or Lisa, somebody did.
I did. I said I had. I went and watched it last year, and it was during a really tough period of my life, and it was fun just to go and laugh, because it's so funny how he the Dan Stevens, the Charles Dickens character, he's like, get out of my life, would you people leave me alone? Characters are invading my world, and it's so hard to think with all of you around. And I just laughed about that, because I find myself thinking about my characters in my books way too much and at very inappropriate times. So
I love it. Who else watched it? Yeah, Lisa?
I went and saw it right when it came out, and there was just a small audience that went to see it. I thought people would be going in droves, and of course there were just a few of us, wonderful people there, and bought it right when it came out. I think Dan Stevens did a remarkable job as well, and his frenetic pace in there could have driven you crazy, but it didn't, because we know we know what that's like. And it was like, I still have this vision of him sitting there just staring and waiting for everybody to show up, and then they do, and I just thought it was delightful. I love it. It encourages me, and I cry at the end. Every time I watch it, I cry at the end. It was very encouraging to me, because I would love to be able to just close my eyes and have my characters just
play it out.
Yeah.
But it kind of gave you the freedom as an author to invite them here, you know. And I'm not a fiction writer, but I'm thinking, what muse, not moose. I tell you, I'm tired. But anyway, what muse should be here in this room as I write, you know. I just think it was, after I watched it the second time on the plane, I turned to my husband and said, I got to go buy this one. I said, it's got to be part of my collection. I felt.
And I thought one other large aspect of it was that his past was such a strong, what did he have, like it was the catalyst that broke him through.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, Rhonda said it was the only movie she watched last Christmas. And it's, like you said, as writers, I think it could work any time of year, but definitely by Christmas.
I thought too, one part I really liked is when I think the housekeeper came to the door and he may have been playing like an accordion or something like that. And he said, I'm working. And she looks like, yeah, sure you are. But you know, that is part of the working, right? We're you know, when we're writing a story, it's there going around, no matter whether you're walking, shopping, it's there, you know. So yeah. Even when you're playing an instrument, you can be, deer sort of past my window. And now the dogs are going to bark. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I hear them. But Melissa commented in the chat, and that she likes to see her fictional characters discussing everyday occurrences. It's fun. So do they help you do the laundry or scrub the kitchen? Huh? The dishes.
I wish.
Oh.
So they just help me get through it, because I hate dishes.
But what a neat idea. Do you talk to them? Because like you made the comment about the imagination character development. You might have this whole conversation that may not end up in the story, but I bet it influences something within a story. It's a great writer's tip. Anybody else want to jump in about The Man Who Invented Christmas, or we won't get to many more? I got one more, and then we'll flip it open here. Anybody else?
I've never seen it, but you guys make me want to see it.
Write that one down. Write it
down. I sure do.
Yeah. The other one, I have several on this list, but the other one I really wanted to mention was Miss Potter. It is the story of Beatrice Potter. And the one thing I liked about the story is that as she's sketching the characters and writing the story, the characters move. They're animated. The film is live action, but they're animated. It was Renee Zellweger. I never on that. And she had a great quote two quotes I was going to share with you from the movie, because it's all you see her creating Peter Rabbit's story. She's the one who wrote Peter Rabbit. I forget that. And when those drawings come alive, it just, I don't know, as a writer, it's inspirational. But two quotes. There's something delicious about writing those first few words of a story. You can never quite tell where they would take you. Mine took me here, and that's where I belong. Isn't that cool? I like that one. And the other one is, stories don't always end where their authors intended, but there is joy in following them there wherever they take us. So I thought that was great.
I'd forgotten that one, and I love that movie. I haven't seen that in several years. Mm-hmm. Now I want to see it.
It makes me want to pull Scott. Then I have a couple on my list later on that I haven't watched for quite a while. And I think, this is going to get me in the mood for a new movie and stuff. So I'm curious what else everybody brought that's on their list before we have, so it's not just Johnny and Jeannie. What else we got?
I can go if you want.
Go ahead, please.
So I wanted to mention too, but I won't stay on the first one very long because it's not my favorite, but it is high on my list. It's hard to think of a movie that is about writers without including Sunset Boulevard. on the list, which is the classic 1950 Billy Wilder film, which is about a writer who is sort of down on his luck. He's kind of an anti-hero. He's not a very nice guy. But he starts following around a washed-up silent film star played by Gloria Swanson, who's sort of losing her mind and out of touch with reality. And he originally goes to write a screenplay about her, but he sort of sticks around to take her money. And like all Billy Wilder movies, it's just like packed with great characters. But I'm disqualifying it a little bit because it's not really about the writing. It's just that's sort of the reason for them to get together. But if you've not seen Sunset Boulevard, 1950 Billy Wilder, awesome, probably one of the best films ever made. But my personal favorite is a little bit out of the box. Is the 1972 musical Man of La Mancha with Peter O'Toole and Sophia Loren, which is the story. I mean, it's not very accurate, but it is the story of Don Miguel Cervantes, who wrote Don Quixote. And in the setting of the musical, the lead character, the main character, is the writer who wrote Don Quixote, and he gets arrested by the Spanish Inquisition. So he's in prison with a bunch of other people who have the Spanish Inquisition, and the other inmates are going to destroy his manuscript. And he makes a deal with them that if he can convince them that what is in the manuscript is valuable, will they spare it? And so the movie is him telling the story of the manuscript he wrote. And sort of the theme, the overarching theme is the idealism of a writer or an artist, and is the madness. They're accusing him of being mad because he doesn't see the world as it is. And his argument is it's more mad to see the world as it is instead of as it should be. And he has this wonderful monologue about what he has seen, what his life was like when he saw life as it is, and what it means to see life as it should be instead. Wow. And I also love movies where there's a story inside the story, because you have the outer story where he is on trial by the other inmates, and then a good bulk of the movie is him imagining the story that's in his manuscript about Don Quixote, which, if you don't know that story, is a real novel about a guy who goes nuts and believes he's a knight and travels out into the world to make it a better place, thinking he's a knight and tilting at windmills. And it's just truly, truly wonderful. And Peter O'Toole is not much of a singer, but he acts the songs so beautifully that you don't care that he's not a great singer. And of course, Sophia Loren is awesome in it as well. So that's my top pick, 1972 Man of La Mancha.
Wow, that is a great addition. I never even thought of that one, and I've seen that one, so I know exactly what you're talking about. Johnny, what were you going to say?
Well, I have heard of it but never seen it, and I want to see it too. And also, I might have missed this in trying to make sure you guys couldn't hear my dogs barking, but the guy that wrote Don Quixote, he actually did spend a long time in prison.
Yes. And
had to be either ransomed out or something like that. I mean, it was more of if I remember right, it was more of a political thing, or because his family had money, or I don't remember for sure, but it was, he spent a long time in prison waiting for the money to be gathered to get him out. Or maybe he escaped. Did he escape?
I can't remember the true story.
There's a real story there, though, too.
Yeah.
I mean,
I know he was really in prison, but I can't remember what really happened to him.
Yeah, so even that is like a really amazing story of this man's life. And then, he wrote Don Quixote, and there weren't copyright laws, and other people were stealing it and passing it off as their own. I mean, there's a whole thing with that we could, interesting to look up. So.
Yeah. Although the irony is that the musical and the play really talk about the idealism of art, but the actual novel Don Quixote, which is like 1 million pages long, is actually kind of cynical. Yeah, it's not as happy as it's presented in Man of La Mancha.
So watch Man of La Mancha instead of getting miserable while reading the book, I guess.
Yeah, it's very discouraging. The book is discouraging, but the movie is very uplifting.
Don Quixote, part of it is that he read all these novels about knights and their daring and all of that. So that drove him crazy. So part of the story's theme seems to be, don't read these books because they'll drive you crazy. Don't read fiction.
Yeah.
They've got people burning them and throwing them out, and it's like they blamed the books on his reading those books on why he then decided he could be a knight.
Right.
Yeah.
Those are great additions. Anybody have a comment about that? Want to jump in? What you got, Robin?
Well, speaking of going crazy with reading fiction, how about Misery?
Yes.
Oh,
that
yeah.
was on my list. Not my favorite, but that's on my list. Talk about it, Robin.
Oh, I can't, because it just makes me crazy. All I can see is her putting that block between his legs and taking the wood and breaking his ankles.
Oh. If you don't know what it was, that's the one with, is it Kathleen Bates and
Kathy Bates, James Caan.
James Caan. He's a novelist that's kidnapped by a fan. Is that
Mega
what it
fan,
is?
sure.
Mega fan, and stuff like that. And it just it I don't know. It's kind of is that a Stephen King?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. On that and that. So if you like Stephen King, but it just kind of gives you, it puts you into misery.
Speaking of Stephen King, then before we move on to something else, who has seen The Secret Window with Johnny Depp? That was basically a Stephen King short story, I believe, and he's a writer.
Yep.
He's crazy. He's Johnny Depp crazy.
Depp crazy.
Say more, right?
Who is it?
I can take us from something very dark to something a lot happier.
Good. Do it, Rhonda. What's up?
I saw it again just yesterday because my mother is addicted to Hallmark movies. And this is, they're doing Christmas in July. It's a movie and it's based on a book called The Mistletoe Inn. Has anyone seen The Mistletoe Inn? Well, I guarantee it will be on Hallmark again several times starting in October. They start with Christmas movies. And I have seen every one ad infinitum, and they all have the same plot. I don't know how that works out, but this particular movie is about a romance writer wannabe. She's not published anything yet, and so I relate to her right away. She goes through a breakup, and she's just come under a lot of criticism, and she decides to revitalize her writing career by attending a writers' conference in December at a very romantic, beautiful place. And while she's there, she meets up with a man who is incognito, and he is the famous author that everybody's gone to this conference to see. They all want to meet this man, and nobody knows what he looks like. Well, he ends up meeting her and interacting with her, and he is on the other end of the writing spectrum, very jaded. He's lost his mojo, his writing mojo. He's struggling. He's under a deadline to produce a new book, and he finds that he just doesn't care much about romance anymore. Well, of course, it's a romance movie.
Mm-hmm.
So they get together in interesting ways. But one of the reasons, I just watched it yesterday with my mother. It was just on, and I thought, well, this is interesting. But one of the things that happens is that she, in this conference, is like a lot of conferences I've been to, she submits a manuscript and it gets critiqued, and they just rip her to pieces. And she's really very talented, but the way she handles all of that and goes up and down, her big question, am I a good writer or am I not? And I looked online, and it is actually a book by a man named Richard Paul Evans. And the first, I looked up some quotes, and one of the first quotes here is, knowing your self-worth isn't something others can validate. You either believe it or you don't. And I thought that's very pithy for me as a beginning writer. You know, everyone asks the question, am I good enough? And this is what this woman is on a hunt, you know, to understand, am I good enough? She goes in for her professional review from the professionals. You know, she gets her feedback, and they're like, well, you're very talented, and this isn't publishable, but keep on trying, you know. And she's just devastated. Her reactions are very realistic and very believable. And of course, it has a happy ending because it is a romance movie.
Yeah.
And it is
What's the name? What's the name of that book?
It's called The Mistletoe Inn.
The Mistletoe Inn.
The Mistletoe Inn. That's the name of the really amazing. I want to find out where that hotel is, where they have a big posh hotel where they have this writers conference. And of course, all the interactions between the writers and all of their aspirations and everything, I was just highly, highly entertained. And I found it encouraging. If I'm not watching Misery.
No.
I have enough misery without watching a movie about it. But this, I always appreciate something that's lighthearted, and yet it is real. There were a lot of real emotions.
That is great. That is great. Now we'll all have to find that. It probably won't be repeated. Well, July's almost done, but you think in fall, Hallmark might, if you had a Hallmark channel, it probably is readable.
Starting October 26th, I can tell you, because they are touting, and they have 22 new movies this year.
Lisa's friend recorded it, so we can go to her house.
So we're all coming over.
Yeah, we'll go. We'll have a party.
Yeah. And please note in the chat, Josh gave us the link to the one scene on YouTube that he mentioned, the monologue at the end. I'm going to click on that now so I can go to that later and see that. Though that might talk. I don't want to talk. Hold on.
This is Rhonda.
Whoa. There you go. So I don't have it talking there on that way. That was that.
Oh, go ahead, Jeannie.
Go ahead.
I'm just going to say, if I mute you, don't take offense. You can unmute yourself when you're ready, but sometimes if there's too much, and you can mute me too if you need to. So,
Ooh, give us the power.
I just thought of that. I'm making Jeannie co-host so she can mute me if she needs to mute me. So don't, I mean, I'm not just, if I mute you, it's only because I think maybe there's some noise coming from you. But
yeah.
Come back as soon as you want to.
Yeah. Go ahead. You got another one, Johnny? Jump in?
See if anybody. Richard Paul Evans. That's what I wanted to say. Who I did not know he wrote The Mistletoe Inn, but if you remember, what was the name of his very first book? And it was a Christmas story, and I believe he self-published it, and it just became a movie starring Richard Thomas, who played John Boyle.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Sorry.
Jeannie. I muted you, but I muted you right away. Someone look up to see Richard Paul Evans, what his first book was, because it was just like an amazing.
He's got a bunch of them.
He does.
A bunch of books.
The one I just recommended is Richard Paul Evans.
Yeah, that's what made me think of him. Maureen O'Hare started the first movie. Something about the Christmas Angel, maybe, or something like that. I don't know. But anyway, he writes those kinds of stories. But
The Christmas Box, maybe?
Yes, The Christmas Box. Yeah. And
1994.
I'm pretty sure he self-published that, and it just took off, and like I said, became a movie and everything. Okay, who else has a movie or a book that they want to talk about?
Well, they mentioned Midnight in Paris, and I'm not that familiar with that one. I don't know if Lisa or John. Lisa, do you want to talk about that one a little bit?
A Woody Allen film. So it's very quirky, but it's great fun. Owen Wilson, I think that's his name, right, Josh?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Stars as this writer who calls himself a Hollywood hack, and he writes screenplays and such. He makes a very good living, and he goes to Paris with his fiance, and they meet her parents there, and he's liberal, the other family is conservative, and he wants to move to Paris and live in a little loft, and that he's marrying into doesn't want anything to do with it, and he's just this very idealistic, romantic, and he's walking around Paris one night at midnight. You can hear the church bell going, and this old 1920s car pulls up, and they say, "Come on, get in," and he goes back in time, and he meets Hemingway and who are the other folks, Josh?
F. Scott Fitzgerald
and
Zelda. What's her name?
Yeah, F. Scott and Zelda, and it's delightful. It's crazy, but it's fun.
What is this? What's the name of this?
Pardon me?
Midnight in Paris.
Midnight in Paris.
Could have write that one down.
I know. I've never seen that.
Uh-uh.
All right.
And it sounds wonderfully imaginative too.
Really is. It really is. And he keeps going back, and then he meets some. Well, I won't do any more spoilers.
Okay.
There's one other thing, if I might, and it's not a movie, it's not a book, it's a cartoon strip, and it's called. I love the funnies. It's called Between Friends. Have any of you?
Mm-mm.
Do any of you read that?
Yeah.
I'm friends with the cartoonist, and she. If you get a chance, look it up. Her name is Sandra Bell Lundy, Lundy. And one of her characters, she's got 3 close friends, and one of them is a writer. So there are a lot of panels where she's sitting at her typewriter, and the family, you know, how the whole system works. It is just, it's fun. It's fun.
Okay, and tell us again, it's called Between Friends.
Yes.
Yes.
And it's Sandra Bell Lundy. Spell that one.
Lundy.
Please, if you want to put that in the chat too. And
Yes,
you
yes.
brought up comic strips. I mean, you know, Snoopy sitting on top of his dollhouse
Yeah.
with his typewriter. Last summer, McDonald's was giving away little Snoopy toys, and I have one of him with his typewriter sitting on top of his dog box. I made sure I got one from the Happy Meal.
Well, if you're mentioning cartoon strips, then one of my favorite movies of all time is a movie called Secondhand Lions.
Oh, yes.
And there's amazing storytelling in it, but it turns out that the main character as a boy grows up to be a cartoonist.
Yeah.
And that is just a wonderful movie all around. If I'm feeling down or low, I just watch that and just laugh. There's a fight between one old guy and 3. It's Robert Duvall is one of the characters, and he just beats up on these young kids, and it is really, really funny. And then they give them stakes to put on their eyes, you know, and then they're going to teach them about life. It's just I just thought that movie was brilliant. Secondhand Lions.
I love that movie. I haven't thought of that in a long time. That was a great one to bring up.
It's just amazing the wealth, and we're just scratching the surface on here.
I know.
Yeah. On the airplane over to Europe, I also watched the current one, The Post, which is about the Washington Post. And of course, it's journalists, which are writers, and it's nonfiction, which of course is my area of love on that. And it's the story before. I thought it was the story of Watergate, you know, when the Post published the Watergate, but it's the story just before it, and Katharine Graham and the Tom Hanks. It's Meryl Streep and Tom Hanks, and of course they're superb. But it's the story when they started publishing the McNamara papers about the Vietnam War ahead of time, and how the New York Times first broke the story about the McNamara parents, that for years we were sending people to Vietnam, and for years they knew we were going to fail there. That's the essence of the papers. And the New York Times gets an injunction put on it, and so it becomes that, do you have the right to publish the truth, or do you have to let the government decide what you're going to publish? So it's that tension. And the Washington Post took the risk to keep publishing, and then that kind of was broke the dam with everybody being able to, publish on that, whether you like journalists or not, on that way. But the comment, the lesson I think I had more from that one was that, I gotta find my note here to say it right, is to, sometimes you have to take the big risk. You know, you have to step out into your uncomfort zone, the zone of unknown, where you're not sure what's going to happen. And as a writer, you kind of keep your eye on that standard. You know this is right. This is worth writing about, and this is how I'm going to say the words, and you just write. So that was kind of the inspiration I had on The Post. It's a very good historical.
It was really good too, as far as showing how Katharine Graham was stepping into her husband's shoes, even though she was the heir to it was her husband who ran it till he died, and about how, as a woman, how difficult it was for her to have a voice.
Yeah. And there is a scene in there where somebody says something about, well, your father, and she says, my father doesn't run this paper anymore. My husband doesn't run this paper anymore. I run this paper.
And it was just, part of those times where
It was.
making that transition to she being able to do it.
Yeah.
I want Matthew to talk about Finding Neverland. I love that.
I love Finding
Neverland. I haven't seen it in a long time.
Yeah, the two that I put on there I haven't seen in a long time either, so I'd have real trouble kind of saying what the plot is. Maybe somebody else knows, but I just remember liking both of those movies. Finding Neverland, loved it. But it's basically, it's really a fictional story, kind of just taking is sort of what could have been inspiration for the writing of Peter Pan. So it's about Nathan Barry. But it's really just, it's kind of a made up story about his relationship with the relationship with the family existed, but everything else in that movie is basically fiction. But it's a wonderful movie.
Sweet.
And isn't it a play now? Aren't they bringing it around like a Broadway play now? Is it?
Could be.
Yeah, I think it might be.
It would be a great play.
Yeah. That is a great addition. And I don't know much about adaptation.
I don't either. Is that
These
the
are-
Orchid Thief? Is it that story?
What's that?
Is it about the Orchid Thief? Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, it's Charlie Kaufman. So if you know, he's writes really weird stuff. So Being John Malkovich was one of his movies as well, where you're basically in the head of John Malkovich for a movie. So I'm not necessarily recommending it, but it's basically about the tortured life of a writer, and it's not clear whether there's him and he has a twin brother who's also a writer. His twin brother writes no problem at all, writes with abandon, the words just come pouring out, and then the main character, both played by Nicolas Cage, the main character, he has writer's block constantly, he can't write, but it's not clear in the movie whether there really are brothers or if this is just a split personality and it's the same person. Wow. So it's just one of these bizarre experiences, and it's also has just lots of bad language, and it's just, so it's probably an acquired taste for some, but I don't know if anyone else has seen that movie, but I saw it when it was in theaters, and I think that was around 2000, 2001, something like that.
Okay. It's one to think about.
Hard to remember it, but it was sort of a mind-bending kind of movie, but also the portrayal of a writer not being able to figure out how to write. And the basic premise is he's trying to adapt a book to a screenplay.
And the book was
figure out how to do it.
Yeah, the book was The Orchid Thief, and they were going to make it into a movie, and for whatever reason, really could not make that book into a movie. So instead, they made the movie about trying to make a book into a movie.
Yeah. So there's a whole story. If you go and even just reading the synopsis, it seems confusing because the synopsis, you think you're reading the backstory about the making of the movie, but that's actually what the movie is about. It's weird. So it's one of those, go and see it and decide whether this was a good idea or not.
Yeah. Melissa brought up Nim's Island. Do you want to talk about Nim's Island for a little bit?
Oh, well, I thought it was a pretty movie. My kids loved it when they were little. And it's kind of divided between the fan and the author as far as who's the focal character of the show. But basically, the movie Nim's Island is about a little girl who's become a fan of this action-adventure writer, and her dad and herself, they live on a secluded island. He's a scientist who studies marine biology. And so she vicariously lives through these adventures that this writer has created, a character who's hot, played by Gerard Butler. And you come to find out that the author, played by Jodie Foster, is very neurotic and never leaves her house and is afraid of everything. And at some point in the movie, Nim becomes hurt, and her father has gone off and not returned from the island, and so in desperation she reaches out to her favorite author, come save me. And so Jodie Foster, the neurotic author, has to get out of her comfort zone and fly to this far off island to help a fan. It's just a funny movie.
That sounds good. I wasn't familiar with that. Melissa, that's a great suggestion. And Sophia mentioned Little Women, which is a classic, writers. And then there's been a lot of recent documentaries later on the Bronte sisters and how they wrote. and all that. And actually, that was one play we saw up at Stratford this summer. And it was all on the Bronte system. So there's a lot of that, on that. That sounds great. On that one we haven't brought up, and Johnny, I know you saw this because, and I hate to keep saying this, I watched this on the plane on the way over. It's a long flight from Detroit to Berlin, trust me. But I'm trying to think of the first word, but I think it was Finding Christopher Robin, something Christopher Robin.
I have Christopher Robin down too, and I didn't look up the name, and I don't quite remember the name of it either. And it was actually
dark.
It was dark, and I love Winnie the Pooh. At one time, my office was decorated with Winnie the Pooh. It had the little bear and the umbrella, hanging down from a corner. It was so cute. But it's about A.A. Milne, who returned from World War I and was just, he'd gone through that war and probably had what we would now call PTSD, and Christopher Robin's life as a young child was not a happy one at all. He sort of felt like everything had to do with him being the character Christopher Robin. Like there's this scene where they're celebrating his birthday, and it's not just his family celebrating his birthday. He has to have pictures taken. It's an event, and he's not really himself the star of it. This Christopher Robin is. Yeah. And it's really kind of sad. He felt like anytime his father played with him, it was more to get research for his stories. And the father really didn't want to write these stories anyway. He wanted to write other stuff, but these were what were selling, what was making the money. And then when he went away to boarding school, everyone made fun of him. Yeah. And they show scenes where other boys pushing him down the stairs, and hard childhood. So it was really hard when you love a little fantasy world like that, and to see the reality behind it.
Yeah.
So there's two movies, right? So there's Goodbye Christopher Robin is the one you're talking about, came out last year.
That's it.
And
Goodbye.
I haven't actually seen it. And then there's a new movie that's out this week that's just called Christopher Robin.
Yes.
Which you're probably gonna like, Johnny.
I
Because that one is just it's Disney, and it's I'm gonna take my daughter to it. Like it's basically a fictional movie, and it's a live action Winnie the Pooh. That Christopher Robin is a character, and he's grown up, and the characters from the Winnie the Pooh start showing up in his life, and he engages with them as an adult in the real world. And there's some adventure they end up having to go on. At least that's what the trailers look like. So it looks like kind of a heartwarming kind of fun movie. But I also want to see the one you're talking about now that you've talked about it.
Yeah, and there are, and I won't tell you what they are then, say them, but there are, towards the end, there are a couple redeeming things that bring it back around that, okay, because really when I'm sitting there watching the movie, I'm thinking, I am never going to read Winnie the Pooh. I mean, I'm never, no Winnie the Pooh in my life. But then at the end, there's a couple scenes, like I said, and it just like, oh, okay, this is
it redeems itself. But Matthew, I'm really glad you mentioned the new one. It's a little lighter. And you got to admit, a lot of writers have dark sides to them, and a lot of our stories come out of that. I was thinking about movies this morning, and I thought, and I did enjoy this movie, the Saving Mr. Banks, which is a story of I'm pulling a blank. Mary Poppins. Yeah, Mary Poppins is the story of the writer behind Mary Poppins too, and in her conflict with Walt Disney in producing this classic that we think of Mary Poppins, and but it is a healing story. I think a lot of it's more fictional, but I did write a quote from Saving Mr. Banks down, and this is a Walt Disney quote that says, "That's what we storytellers do. We restore order with our imagination. We instill hope again and again and again." Now that does sound like Walt Disney, I think, but he was, I think it was more fictionalized than true, but there was some truth to the whole Mary Poppins, the origin of the Mary Poppins story. So some of these
did not like it. She did not like having the songs, or she just thought it cheapened her character. But but we love Mary Poppins. I mean, and they're making a new Mary Poppins movie too. There's a new. I've seen.
Is there?
For that as well. Yeah, that looks
okay. Well, they're talking about the Wonder Boys. Yeah, I don't know much about the Wonder Boys. Who's seen that? And with
seen it.
Michael Douglas? What's that about?
I've seen it, but it's been a really long time. But basically, I mean, the writing aspect of it is Michael Douglas he's written a best-selling book. He's an English professor, I think, and he's written a best-selling book, and now he's trying to write the follow-up, and he's just feels like he's under so much pressure to meet the level that he got and critical acclaim that he got in the first one. Or maybe it wasn't best-selling, but it had critical acclaim. So he's trying to live up to that. And it turns out that you find out partway through the movie that he's been talking about how he's had writer's block, but actually he hasn't really technically had writer's block. His manuscript is like over 1,000 pages, and he just can't figure out what the story's really about.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but I can't really remember. Like, I feel like at the end of the movie, I was like, oh, it was just an okay movie. Like, I didn't feel like this was the greatest movie ever made. But yeah, there's some interesting things, and I remember that. But
yeah,
hard to remember the plot.
And Sophia asked a question, and it's ringing a bell with me too, Sophia, but I don't know the name of the movie. That it's a trailer about a movie out right now about an author that travels to meet her fans in a book club. Does that ring a bell with anybody?
That in the earlier UK.
It's new, right? New, Sophia? Okay, let's kind of watch for that. Maybe we could bring it, if somebody sees the trailer, get the name of the movie, we could always tell everybody either on the Facebook page or whatever. And Melissa talks about Shakespeare in Love. That's kind of a fun movie, isn't it? I don't know if you've seen that. It's kind of fun. Becoming Jane doesn't. Is that Austen?
Jane
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about that one, Melissa?
Oh, well, both movies, it's been so long since I've seen them. I don't know that I remember a lot of the story. And I don't know how much of them are based fully on fact.
Yeah.
And Shakespeare in Love is mostly fictionalized.
I think it is.
I think the Becoming Jane might be partially true, but kind of stretched. I'm not entirely certain on that one either. But the Becoming Jane basically was telling about the kind of the life of Jane Austen, you know, and her struggles to become an author and in you know, a time period where female authors weren't acceptable. And then you know, pulling in the whole forbidden love life in the background of it. Yeah, it's not one I chose one of my favorites, but it's interesting.
Interesting. Okay. What about Ghostwriter, you guys that are responding to Ghostwriters? Who was the other one? Lisa?
Ghostwriter. I have both read the book and watched the movie.
Okay, you should be the one to talk about it then.
Well, it's the really fun thing about Ghostwriter is this guy is ghostwriting a book for the president. He was kind of brought in when the other ghostwriter was killed, I believe. You never learn his name. Like they have set it up throughout the whole book. You never know what the guy's name is, which is just one of the, you know, kind of cool things. Even when he's being introduced to somebody, there'll be an interruption, so his name is not mentioned in the book. And I don't remember. I saw the movie not too long ago, so I remember how it ended, and it did creep me out too. I don't remember that that's how it ended in the book, though. So it might have been a little bit different. But yeah, he gets really caught up in a trying to. I guess there's a scandal with the president, and trying to find out the truth of it, but then also kind of gets caught up in it, and lives are in danger and so forth, including his own.
Oh.
Big vetting practices when we do any ghostwriting.
So is this one you shouldn't watch late at night, creepy, or is it just watch it anytime type thing?
Yeah.
Okay. That got me curious.
Pierce Brosnan plays the president in this movie. And I'm trying to remember who plays the ghostwriter, because I think it's Ian. Who played Obi-Wan Kenobi? Wasn't that
Ewan McGregor?
Ewan McGregor. I think he plays the ghostwriter. I'm not positive about that.
He does.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Okay, I think Josh found the answer for us.
I read that book. Yeah.
The Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society. I gotta write that one down. And Elaine presented the ghostwriter as you were talking about the ghostwriter. I don't know if you watched the white cat go across her screen. That was our. So that's the new movie. Is that what you're saying, Josh and everybody? The Guernsey? Oh, that is.
Yeah, I saw the trailer last week, so I don't know much about it, but I remembered it where she goes to an island and sort of surprises the people in this book club. And I don't really know what the plot is, but I saw the trailer and had to look up the title because it was such a strange title.
It's a long title. Yeah, it's the story itself, the main bulk of the story, the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society, is about World War II, and that one of the, some of those Channel Islands were actually taken over by the Germans and occupied by the Germans during the war, and the Guernsey Island is one of them. And it's kind of about how these people survived during that occupation. And there may be then this overarching story about the author in the book club, and I'm not sure exactly how that ties in. I don't remember, but yeah.
I hope it's that one, because when I tried to look it up, I got Book Club, which is the one with Diane Keaton, where they're reading 50 Shades of Grey.
Oh. Yeah,
and we have discussions about it. I'm like, I don't think that's what we're talking about.
I don't think so. We're hoping this is the other title we're looking for. And this is,
I hope so.
And this is a new movie, correct? Is that what we're saying, Josh? It's just new, or is it been out?
Yeah, I think it. I don't think it's even out yet here, but it might. But it might be. And I had the same problem, Matthew. I kept coming up with Book Club too, but then I remembered that it took place that she went to an island. So I added island to the search, and that's...
there you go.
All right. Well, thank you for finding that, guys. That's great. That's great. Hey, I know we only got a couple minutes here left, but I wanted to mention Julie and Julia, because I'm a blogger. And you got to, if anybody blogs, you got to remember that book. And it's the one who blogs her, I think, over a course of a year, where she tries all of Julia Child's recipe, and she learns to, but it's just, so it's the story of Julia Roberts. Who mentioned a story within a story? That's a story within a storybook. It's Julia Child, the story of Julia Child inside Julia, the author, Powell, maybe Julia Powell, the two authors within their parallels of their life.
I believe, maybe.
Just say again.
I think Amy Adams played her and Meryl Streep again.
Yes.
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 Meryl Streep movie kind of coming across the air.
And it jumps back and forth between their stories. And it's kind of neat, and it shows value of blogging, and building a platform.
Becoming a thing, and she was one of the first to get a book contract from her decision to blog every day and do a recipe every day, and she did it.
Yeah, on that. Well, this has been a great discussion.
One more book. Sorry, that was
good. Do it. Do it.
One more book. This is a recent book put out by Val. Now I don't remember. Called Lady Jane Disappears. If you like historical fiction, I really highly recommend this. It's the debut novel by Joanna Davidson Politano, and I can put her name in the chat. I don't have a copy of the book with me to show you because I'm not at home, but she was inspired by Dickens writing his serials. So her main character is a young woman who grew up in a debtor's prison, and her father would write these serial stories, so it's during that time period, and no one really knew who he was. Like, only the publisher knew who the writer was. Well, when her father dies, she continues writing the story, and she goes to live with relatives who don't really want to recognize her as being a relative because she grew up in the debtor's prison. So there's all this backstory. But if you like those kinds of historic romances and kind of that Victorian and Dickens, and again, it's got the debtor's prison, it's got this serialized story, and then these characters, she's telling, as she's writing her stories, she's basing it on the people around her, and so now they know that somebody is writing the story, but of course no one suspects it could be a woman, so they don't suspect her, and so there's all of that in it. And Joanna is just a phenomenal writer. I mean, she writes beautifully. So I'll put that in the chat, and if you were looking for something to read,
and we've had a couple of them added to the chat too that I want to mention, so it's sure they're on the recording, because it's Something's Got to Give, which Lisa said was a good look at the screenwriter as he pens a new play, and Rhonda brought up the Diary of Anne Frank, which is a really, when you think about it, she said Rhonda's correct. It was like a blog, in a way. She was blotting her journal, what was going on with her. And we have to mention The Help, that what shows the power of the written word, in writing that on that way. We're getting a lot of good ideas. Somewhere in Time with Christopher Reeve and Jane Seymour,
Years. That was
Lady Jane spelled with a Y, Johnny, huh?
Yes, Lady Jane.
Okay.
It's spelled with a Y. Gosh, Somewhere in Time, I didn't even remember that being about a writer. I remember Christopher Reeves and Jane Seymour.
So that
muted, Josh. Okay.
Josh, we got you muted.
I can't unmute him.
Oh, sorry.
Here we go.
Okay.
I muted it because I was typing. Okay. Yeah, so Christopher Reeve plays a playwright, a very successful playwright that has writer's block and is not doing well. And he, goes to this old theater village and falls in love with an actress from the past. And it's about his journey between the writer and the actress.
Okay.
I love that movie.
Super schlocky. My wife won't even watch it. She thinks it's so mushy. It's like Hallmark times 20, but I adore it. I adore it. I love it.
I haven't seen it since Bethany was like 2 years old. So, but I remember it. Yeah, at least bits and pieces. I was surprised no one mentioned Anne of Green Gables, but I expected everybody to mention Anne. Anne of Avonlea, Anne of Green Gables. So I'm just going to throw her out there too because she's a fave.
Yeah, on that. Well, I don't think we're going to get any writing done this afternoon because we're all going to be Googling movies or watching movies. So remember to write, and that I will tell you that was one we did mention, and I know we're starting to go over here, but I hadn't watched this one for a long time, but I saw this on a list this morning, Finding Forrester.
That movie.
Yeah, which is about a gifted inner city teen who prevents a recluse author, William Forrester, who's played by Sean Connery, who hopes to develop his writing. And there's the scene, the clip I saw again, because I was trying to remember what about the movie was. He just sits down and they were just free writing all over. And William Forrester says, you must write your first draft with your heart and you rewrite it with your head. The first key to writing is to write, not to think. So it also is probably key to write, not to watch movies about writing, but to write on that way. So Finding Forrester.
Like, no matter what you write, there's a movie out there to inspire you, right? I mean, we've talked about horror movies and historical,
dark movies,
literary, and just, we've run the gamut here.
We have. This has been a great list and stuff. It's been fun, and it's fun having open mic days. We always seem to have some enthusiasm. Oh, Shadowlands. That's C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis. Yeah.
It's hard to find that though. I have been looking for it off and on for a while, and last time it's been a while since I looked, but I couldn't even find it like on Amazon. Maybe it's there now. Yeah, it was. That's such a good movie.
Oh my! I've got lists all over my cheat sheet here. Yeah, on that. So we have a lot. We got some right. Johnny,
next week.
Next week. All right.
So I would know. Tom, I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name. Blaubau, maybe Blaubaugh. He founded a website called Authors Community, and Jan Martin, who's one of our regulars in the chat, recommended him. She's been working with him. The website says it's where authors meet, discuss, and learn. So he's going to be here next week to talk about his website and about what it offers to authors. We're a little bit up in the air about this, but 2 weeks from today, we should be talking about what's the name of the book? Gary V.
Jab, right hook.
Jab. We may be putting that off for a little bit, but do know it is coming. If we don't do it that week, we'll be doing it soon because Bethany definitely wants to be here for that, and she's having some scheduling things. So So it just kind of depends on whether she can be here or not on that Tuesday. So but we do have things, coming up, and we just always appreciate y'all for being here on Tuesday mornings and joining us. And those of you who are here, stay for the after party. And if you've watched us on the replay, we really do thank you for doing that. And we invite you, if you have the opportunity, to join us every Tuesday. Here we are. 11 o'clock Eastern, 10 o'clock Central. We also invite you to join our Writers Chat Facebook group and to like our Writers Chat Facebook page. So thank you.
Bye, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.